They say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes the cruelest wounds come from your own family. My children spent 20 years making one of my granddaughters their scapegoat, and they had no idea I was watching every single moment. When they finally learned what I'd done with my fortune, well, let's just say some lessons can only be taught from the grave. My name is Clara, and for 72 years, I thought I understood what family meant. I raised 3 children. David, my eldest son who became a successful lawyer. Sarah, my middle daughter who married well. And Michael, my youngest, who took over my late husband's construction business. All successful, all seemingly good people. But success doesn't guarantee character, as I learned when my grandchildren started arriving. It began so subtly I almost missed it. Emma, David's middle daughter, was always different. Quieter, more thoughtful, with an artist's soul that somehow made her an easy target. At family dinners, when something went wrong, a broken dish, a spilled drink, a raised voice, all eyes would turn to Emma first. "Emma probably did it," became the family refrain, even when she wasn't in the room. I watched my own children perpetuate this cruel pattern. When David's business faced a setback, somehow it was because he'd been distracted by Emma's problems. When Sarah's daughter got into trouble at school, it was Emma's bad influence. When Michael's son struggled with grades, Emma's negative energy was to blame. The girl couldn't breathe without someone finding fault with the air she exhaled. But the pattern went deeper than simple blame. I began to notice how Emma was systematically excluded from family decisions, celebrations, and even conversations. When we planned family vacations, Emma's preferences were never considered. When we discussed college plans for the grandchildren, Emma's dreams of art school were dismissed as impractical, while her cousin's career aspirations were celebrated. I remember one Christmas when Emma, then 15, had spent weeks creating handmade gifts for everyone. Beautiful watercolor portraits of family members. The reaction was telling. David glanced at his portrait for barely 3 seconds before setting it aside. "That's nice, Emma. Very artistic." Sarah actually wrinkled her nose at hers. "The nose looks a bit off, don't you think? Maybe stick to store-bought gifts next year." Meanwhile, Emma's cousin Jake gave everyone generic gift cards he'd clearly picked up last minute, and the family praised his thoughtfulness and practicality. The double standard was so blatant it made my chest ache. Emma's face that Christmas morning, watching her hours of love and effort being casually dismissed, will haunt me forever. She never made handmade gifts again. The most insidious part was how they'd rewrite history to maintain their narrative. If Emma achieved something noteworthy, like when she won the school art competition, they'd find ways to diminish it. Well, it was a small school, or art isn't really competitive like real subjects. But when her cousin Michael Jr. made JV football as a bench warmer, it was worthy of a family celebration dinner. I started keeping a journal, documenting these incidents, not because I planned to use it as evidence, but because the gaslighting was so constant that I began to question my own perceptions. Was I imagining the cruelty? Was I being overly protective of Emma? The journal told the truth. In just 6 months, I documented 47 separate incidents of Emma being blamed, excluded, or diminished. 47 times my own children had chosen cruelty over kindness toward a child who had never done anything but try to belong. But perhaps the most heartbreaking entry I wrote was about Emma's 16th birthday. She had quietly mentioned to me weeks earlier that she hoped the family might actually celebrate it this time. Not like her 15th, which had been forgotten entirely, or her 14th, which had been overshadowed by her cousin's basketball tournament. I decided to orchestrate something special, I called David, Sarah, and Michael separately, reminding them about Emma's birthday and suggesting we have a proper family celebration. The responses were telling. "Oh, is that this weekend? I thought it was next month." "Well, if we must, but let's keep it simple. She's not really a party person anyway. Can we make it early? I have a golf tournament that afternoon." The party itself was a masterclass in subtle cruelty. Sarah brought a cake, but it was chocolate, despite knowing Emma was allergic to chocolate, and had been since she was 8 years old. "Oh, I completely forgot. I guess Emma can just eat the ice cream." The gifts were equally revealing. David gave her a generic gift card to a store she never shopped at. Sarah gave her a self-help book about building confidence, the implication being that Emma's problems were her own fault for lacking self-esteem. Michael forgot to bring anything at all and stopped at a gas station on the way over to buy a car air freshener still in its plastic wrapping. Meanwhile, the family spent most of the party discussing Emma's cousin Tyler's recent acceptance to college, her cousin Mia's new boyfriend, and her cousin Jason's summer internship. Emma sat at her own birthday party listening to everyone celebrate other people's achievements, while her own existence was barely acknowledged. The final insult came when Tyler's girlfriend, who barely knew Emma, gave a more thoughtful gift than Emma's own parents, a beautiful sketchbook and a set of quality-colored pencils, because she'd noticed Emma liked to draw. After everyone left, I found Emma in the kitchen, quietly cleaning up the mess from her own birthday party. Chocolate. Cake crumbs she couldn't even eat scattered across my table. "Thank you for trying, Grandma Clara," she said softly. "I know you asked them to come." The fact that she thanked me for her family's bare minimum effort broke something inside my chest that never quite healed. The breaking point came during Emma's 18th birthday party, or what should have been her party. Sarah had forgotten to order a cake. David arrived 2 hours late, and Michael spent the evening on work calls. When Emma's cousin accidentally knocked over a glass of wine, staining Sarah's white tablecloth, the blame fell swift and merciless. "This is exactly what I'd expect at an Emma party," Sarah muttered, scrubbing at the stain. "Some people just attract chaos," David added, not even looking up from his phone. I found Emma later, sitting on my back porch with tears streaming down her face. "Grandma Maggie," she whispered, "what's wrong with me? Why do they hate me so much?" My heart shattered. This beautiful, sensitive girl thought she deserved their cruelty. "There's nothing wrong with you, sweetheart," I said, holding her tight. Sometimes families lose their way, and they need reminding of what really matters. That night, I made my first attempt to intervene. I called David, Sarah, and Michael separately, trying to make them see what they were doing to Emma. The responses were predictable. "Mom, you're being dramatic. We're not picking on Emma. She's just sensitive. Maybe if she toughened up a little. You always had a soft spot for the troubled ones, Mom." Troubled ones. As if kindness was a character flaw. As if sensitivity was something to be cured. But I wasn't giving up that easily. Over the next several months, I tried different approaches. I suggested family therapy. "We don't need therapy, Mom. We're fine." I offered to pay for Emma to go to art camp, thinking maybe if she had achievements they couldn't ignore, things might change. That's a waste of money. She needs to focus on real subjects. I even tried hosting separate events where Emma could shine, small dinners where I'd showcase her artwork, or afternoons where we'd work in my garden together, something she loved. But my children found ways to undermine even these small victories. When Emma helped me plant a beautiful rose garden that neighbors constantly complimented, Sarah commented, "Well, it's nice Emma finally found something she's not terrible at. When I displayed Emma's paintings prominently in my living room, Michael joked, "Mom's turning into one of those grandmothers who thinks everything her grandkid does is museum-worthy." The cruelty was so casual, so automatic, that I realized it had become their family identity. Emma wasn't just the scapegoat. She was necessary for their sense of superiority. Without her to look down on, they might have to examine their own flaws. The final straw came during Emma's senior year of high school. She'd been accepted to 3 different art schools, including one with a partial scholarship. This should have been a moment of family celebration. Instead, it became another opportunity for them to diminish her. At what should have been her celebration dinner, David spent most of the evening talking about his oldest son's acceptance to law school. "Now that's a real achievement," he said. "A career with actual prospects." Sarah chimed in. "I just hope Emma's being realistic about her future. Artists don't exactly make reliable livings." Michael nodded sagely. Maybe she should have a backup plan. Something practical. Emma sat there, her acceptance letters wilting in her hands, watching her family turn her greatest achievement into a cautionary tale. That night, she called me crying. "Grandma Clara, what if they're right? What if I'm just fooling myself about being good enough?" 20 years of systematic emotional abuse had done its work. This brilliant, talented, kind young woman actually believed she didn't deserve success or support from her own family. That's when I realized that words wouldn't change them. They were too invested in their cruelty, too comfortable with having Emma as their family's emotional punching bag. They needed a lesson that would echo through generations. 3 months after Emma's ruined birthday, I made an appointment with Harold Brennan, the family lawyer who'd handled our affairs for 30 years. I'd been thinking about this decision for weeks, turning it over like a stone in my palm, examining every angle. "Margaret, are you absolutely certain about this?" Harold asked, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed my new will. "This is quite a departure from your previous arrangement." I looked out his office window at the bustling street below, thinking of all the family gatherings where Emma sat alone, all the times my children's casual cruelty had gone unchecked. "Harold, I've watched my family for 20 years. I've seen who they really are when they think no one important is watching. Emma has endured their scapegoating with grace and dignity that puts them all to shame. If my money is going to make a statement about the values I want to outlive me, then yes, I'm certain." The new will was simple and devastating. My entire estate, worth approximately $3.2 million from my late husband's successful business ventures and our careful investments, would go to Emma alone. My 3 children would receive nothing but a letter explaining exactly why. "There's one more thing, Harold," I said as I signed the final document. "I want this sealed until after my funeral. I want them all to hear it together, in the same room where they've spent years diminishing that beautiful girl." Harold nodded solemnly. "The reading will take place 1 week after the service, as requested." For the next 2 years, I carried this secret like a precious stone in my pocket. I watched my children continue their pattern of casual cruelty, never suspecting that each slight against Emma was another nail in the coffin of their inheritance. I watched Emma graduate high school as valedictorian, an achievement her parents barely acknowledged, and start community college while working part-time at a local bookstore to support herself. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Emma worked 2 jobs to pay for her education, my children began making increasingly transparent hints about their expectations for my estate. David started conversations about wise financial planning for the future. Sarah brought up family obligations and taking care of the next generation. Michael talked about honoring Dad's legacy through responsible wealth management. I began to test them, curious about just how deep their sense of entitlement ran. During one family dinner, I casually mentioned that I was thinking about donating some money to charity. "Well, that's generous, Mom," David said carefully. "But maybe you should make sure your own family's taken care of first. Emma could probably use help with her college expenses," I suggested innocently. The silence was deafening. Finally, Sarah spoke up. "Emma made her choices, Mom. If she wanted family support, maybe she should have been more invested in family relationships." It was a masterpiece of gaslighting. Emma, who had endured 20 years of emotional abuse with remarkable grace, was being blamed for the very distance that abuse had created. During this time, I also began to see Emma truly blossom, away from her family's toxic influence. At the bookstore where she worked, she was beloved by customers and colleagues. She'd started teaching art classes to children at the community center on weekends. She was dating a kind young man named Marcus, who clearly adored her. In environments where she wasn't constantly criticized and blamed, Emma revealed herself to be confident, funny, and naturally gifted with people. The girl my children had convinced everyone was difficult and troubled was actually thriving. She just needed to be away from them to do it. This contrast made their treatment of her even more unforgivable. They weren't responding to who Emma actually was. They were maintaining a fiction they'd created about her to serve their own psychological needs. I passed away on a Tuesday morning in March, peacefully in my sleep at age 74. The funeral was everything you'd expect. Tears, flowers, speeches about what a wonderful mother and grandmother I'd been. Emma sat in the front row with the rest of the family, still believing she was somehow less deserving of love than the rest of them. 1 week later, Harold convened the will reading in his conference room. David, Sarah, and Michael arrived in their finest clothes, barely contained excitement flickering in their eyes. They'd already begun discussing how to divide their windfall. Emma came quietly, expecting nothing, as always. Harold cleared his throat. "Before I begin, I want you to know that Margaret was very specific about how this was to be handled. She wanted you all to hear this together." He opened the sealed document and began to read. "To my children, David, Sarah, and Michael. For 20 years, I have watched you treat your niece Emma as the family scapegoat. I have seen you blame her for problems she didn't create, exclude her from joy she helped make possible, and diminish her spirit in ways that would make any grandmother weep. You turned a sensitive, loving girl into your emotional punching bag, and you did it so casually that I don't think you ever realized the cruelty of your actions." The room fell silent. David's face went white. Sarah's mouth opened in shock. Harold continued. "You have shown me who you truly are when you think no one is watching. Emma has shown me grace under pressure, kindness in the face of cruelty, and strength that puts you all to shame. Therefore, I leave my entire estate, including the house, all investments, and all liquid assets, to my granddaughter, Emma Marie Peterson. To my 3 children, I leave this lesson. Treat people with kindness, or discover that kindness has consequences you never expected." The explosion was immediate and volcanic. "This is impossible," David shouted, jumping from his chair. "She manipulated her. Emma somehow turned her against us. That little witch," Sarah hissed, turning on Emma with 20 years of suppressed venom. "You planned this, didn't you? You played the victim until you could steal what was rightfully ours." Michael slammed his fist on the table. "We'll contest this. There's no way this will stand up in court. Mom wasn't in her right mind." Through it all, Emma sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. Not from joy, but from the final brutal confirmation of how her family truly saw her. Even in the moment of her vindication, they couldn't see past their own greed to recognize their cruelty. Harold's voice cut through their rage like a blade. The will is ironclad, and Margaret was thoroughly evaluated by 2 independent physicians in the months before her death. She was completely competent and aware of her decisions. "You don't understand," David said, his lawyer's mind racing. "That money was supposed to be divided among the 3 of us. We have plans, investments, obligations. Emma doesn't deserve this," Sarah added, her voice dripping with decades of resentment. "She never contributed to the family business, never helped with Mom's care, because you never let her," Harold interrupted quietly. "Margaret was very clear about that in her private conversations with me. Emma was excluded from family business decisions and caregiving opportunities. She wasn't allowed to contribute, then blamed for not contributing." The truth hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. But the drama was far from over. What happened next revealed the true depths of my children's character and confirmed that my decision had been absolutely correct. David immediately shifted into lawyer mode, pulling out his phone to start making calls. "I'm contacting Patterson and Associates first thing Monday morning. This will never hold up in court. Harold, you're going to be named as a co-defendant in this lawsuit," he said coldly. "This is clearly elder abuse and undue influence." Poor Harold, who had been our family lawyer for 3 decades, looked stunned by the accusation. "David, I have detailed records of all my conversations with your mother. She was evaluated by 2 independent physicians. Her mental state was completely sound." Sarah was approaching Emma now, her face twisted with rage. "You manipulative little snake. How long have you been working on this? Did you feed her lies about us? Did you convince her we were terrible people?" Emma, still in shock, could barely speak. I didn't know. I swear I had no idea. Don't lie to me," Sarah screamed. "This didn't happen by accident. You planned this." That's when Michael said something that revealed the true tragedy of the situation. "Emma, if you had any decency, you'd refuse this inheritance. You know it should go to Mom's real children." Real children. After everything Emma had endured, after being blamed for every family problem for 2 decades, they still couldn't see her as truly belonging to the family. Harold stood up, his professional composure cracking. "I think this meeting needs to end. The will is legally valid, and these accusations are unfounded and frankly disturbing." But David wasn't finished. "Emma, I want you to know that if you go through with this, you're dead. To this family. You'll never be welcome at another family gathering. Your cousins will know what you did. Everyone will know you stole from your own family." The threat was as revealing as it was cruel. They were offering Emma exactly what they'd already been giving her: exclusion and blame, in exchange for millions of dollars. They couldn't even recognize the irony. Emma finally found her voice, and what she said surprised everyone, including me, looking down from whatever comes after life. "You're threatening to treat me the way you've always treated me. The only difference is now I'll have enough money to build a real family, one based on love instead of cruelty." It was the first time in 20 years that Emma had stood up to them directly. The inheritance hadn't just given her financial security, it had given her the power to speak her truth. I wish I could have been there to see their faces, to watch them finally understand the cost of their casual cruelty. But perhaps it's better this way. Let them sit with the weight of what they've lost, not just in money but in character. Emma used the inheritance wisely, just as I knew she would. She finished her education, bought a small house and started a non-profit for young people who feel like outsiders in their own families. She never forgot the lessons she learned from being scapegoated. Lessons in empathy, resilience, and the true meaning of family. She also used part of the money to fund art programs in schools, something that would have made her grandfather, my dear husband, incredibly proud. He always said that art was the language of the soul, and Emma was finally free to speak fluently. Most importantly, she built the loving family she'd always deserved. She married Marcus 2 years later, in his small ceremony surrounded by friends, who truly cared about her. When their first child was born, a daughter they named Clara in my honor, I felt a peace that I'd never experienced in life. My children? They tried to contest the will, of course, hiring expensive lawyers and making wild claims about undue influence. They lost every challenge. The last I heard, and yes, sometimes we hear things from beyond, they'd begun to understand that their anger was really grief. Not grief for the money they'd lost, but grief for the family they destroyed with their own hands. David eventually wrote Emma a letter. Not an apology, exactly, but an acknowledgement that perhaps things had gotten out of hand over the years. Sarah attended one of Emma's art shows, though she left without speaking. Michael has remained silent, but I'm told he asks about Emma sometimes. Redemption is a slow process, and I'm not sure all of them will complete the journey in this lifetime. But the possibility exists, and sometimes that's enough. You see, I didn't leave my fortune to Emma to punish my children. I left it to her to reward character over blood, kindness over cruelty, and integrity over inheritance. The money was never the real legacy. The lesson was, family isn't about shared genetics. It's about shared respect, shared love, and shared responsibility to lift each other up. When you make someone your scapegoat, you don't just wound them, you wound the entire family tree, right down to its roots. Emma learned that lesson from the wrong side of cruelty. My children are learning it now. Too late, but not impossibly so. Redemption is always possible. But it starts with admitting the truth about who you've been, and choosing to become someone better. The greatest inheritance any family can leave isn't money. It's the example of how to treat the most vulnerable person in the room with dignity and love. Final image. Same portrait of Margaret as the opening, but now with a sense of peace and completion in her expression. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever witnessed family scapegoating, or been on the receiving end yourself? Share your story below. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is break the silence around family cruelty and start conversations about what family really means.